Hello, friends, and welcome back to Colliding Worldviews. It's such a blessing to have you with me here every single week as we do talk about the worldviews that collide, that are held by billions of people throughout the world. And yet, if one of those worldviews is true, the other ones are automatically false. So it's great to have you here with me every single week as we talk to great guests and talk about many vital topics about these colliding worldviews and how just more examples of how we need to get the gospel out to the world. Jesus said that he came into the world to bear witness of the truth, and we as Christians, it is our job to proclaim the gospel to a lost and dying world, and of course defend the historic Christian faith when necessary. Here with me today on Colliding Worldviews is a man who has been here a number of times before, and he wrote a very important book, perhaps the most important book published in 2017. And I want to encourage you to go to his website to buy this book, because that is how you can directly support him and his vital work. And also, he'll actually sign the book for you as well, which, of course, you're not going to get from anywhere else. And the book is called Stealth Invasion: Muslim Conquest Through Immigration and Resettlement Jihad. This is a more timely book than ever before, even though it was written, again, about 2 years ago, because what he mentions in this book is still happening today. And thankfully, more and more people are noticing it. They're finally realizing it. But this is the book, and the author is none other than Leo Hohmann from leohohmann.com. Again, that is the website that you want to go to get this book. Even if we could just get every American to just read the preface to this book, that would be a huge help. And that's why it's a blessing to have him here with me. Leo, welcome back to Colliding Worldviews once again.
Thanks for having me back, Tony. Glad to be with you.
It's great to have you here to inform our audience about what's been happening. We did the first show on your book, and then we did a second show called Stealth Invasion Update, I believe, the Trump Factor. And that was a little spin on what you had presented the first time you were here. And now you're back today to talk about some of the newest headlines that we are seeing in the news. And as you and I both know, more Americans are waking up to what's happening, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily know what to do from here on forward. There's a couple of things that we wanted to talk about today. One of them was in reference to the Pope and Islam. People may have seen the news stories recently with the Pope and the president or head of Al-Azhar, which is the most prominent Islamic university, a Sunni university in the world. And also we want to talk about the Muslim congresswomen who are definitely in the news because of the things that they are doing and, of course, the things that they are saying. What would you like to give our audience a summary of, just as a beginning for the Islam, the Pope, what's been happening with the Vatican and all of that?
Many of your listeners, viewers may not have actually seen the headline a couple of weeks ago in which the Pope signed this historic document with the head of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt, because it didn't receive much media coverage in the mainstream media at all. I didn't see anything about it, in fact, on the major network TV stations, other than a little scroll on the bottom, the things that are happening that they really don't want to talk about. But it was truly historic, because here you have the head of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Francis, meeting at the Global Government Summit in the United Arab Emirates. It was last month, towards mid to late February, at this Global Government Summit, and they end up signing off on a pact, Catholicism and Islam. The title of that is On Human Fraternity for World Peace and Living Together. And in this document, it says that all religions are basically ordained by God, that no religion is superior to another, that they're all equally legitimate and equally have something to offer of value. And Islam is prominent among all the religions, this document says, and that there should be more cooperation between the faiths, and that there's some good things in the document, don't get me wrong. It talks about how individual peoples across the world should not be coerced to join any particular religious faith. I think we could all agree with that. It denounces terroristic organizations like ISIS who demand that we acquiesce to their religious faith of the barrel of a gun or the blade of a sword. I think we would all agree with that. Uh, but it does talk about this generic, general equality of all religious faiths. And you also have to take with a grain of salt all of these good things in the document, because the signature to the document, along with Pope Francis, is this gentleman out of Al-Azhar University, which, as you said, is the premier Sunni source of Islamic law in the world. And this is the same Al-Azhar University that has regularly called for, death to apostates, people who leave Islam. In fact, the signature himself, Mr. Ahmed Al-Taib, has been on record speaking in Arabic, saying that apostates should indeed be killed. People who leave the Islamic faith should be killed, that's in the Quran, and that is absolutely to be upheld by today's Islamic authorities. So you have to ask yourself, how genuine was his statements in this document? It sounds to me like it's more a propaganda coup for the ears and eyes of the Western liberals than it is for his Muslim followers, because he's saying one thing in Arabic to them and a wholly different thing in English in documents like this one that he signed with the Pope. And so I really do believe that until Al-Azhar throws all of these other pronouncements into a big, huge bonfire, we should not believe any of the niceties that are included in this document, but we should take serious the overall tone of it, which is this drive towards, blurring the lines between the religions.
And just as there are true born-again Christians throughout the world who do read the Bible, they do know why they believe what they believe. This is the case with some Roman Catholics. Other Roman Catholics is more about tradition and just listening to the priest or the Pope and what they say. What they say must be true. Mm-hmm. But any Roman Catholic who looks to their own sources, if they study Islam and compare that, they know there's a fallacy within the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I have a quote here. If anyone does have a Catechism of the Catholic Church, just go to Part 1, Section 2, Chapter 3, Article 9, Paragraph 3. And if you go down to Section 841, Leo, I'm not sure if you had read this, but this is in the primary source of the Roman Catholic Church. And this is the Church's relationship with the Muslims. Listen to what it says here. The plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator, in the first place amongst whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us they adore the one merciful God, mankind's judge on the last day. Now, a number of problems here when we compare this claim to Islamic theology and compare that to Christian theology. Number one, it says the faith of Abraham. Well, the Catechism of the Catholic Church is committing the Abrahamic fallacy here, because the Abraham that Jews and Christians would agree about does not line up with the Abraham of Islam. That doesn't line up there historically. So Abrahamic fallacy there. And then, of course, here claiming that they do worship the one true God, and not even making a distinction there between theological worship and, of course, ontological or metaphysical being of first cause. That distinction isn't there at all. So problems there. But Leo, this is in the primary source. And even if we didn't have that, you have the man who is looked to by Roman Catholics throughout the world as the greatest authority here on earth, pretty much, making this pact with the head of Al-Azhar, who, if you have the Reliance of the Traveler, that as well as other Sharia books are endorsed by Al-Azhar. And they know their Islam. The only sugarcoating that goes on is when they are doing these public proclamations, partnerships per se with different groups, and they are trying to make Islam palatable in the West. But as you said, Leo, when they are speaking in Arabic, when they are speaking in their own country to their own people, they aren't actually saying, hey, let's go ahead and coexist with the West, because that's what Muhammad told us to do, right? So
Right.
lots of problems there.
You are
What do you think?
absolutely right. And
What do you?
this love affair with Islam in the Catholic Church, I should say in the Vatican, because that's really where it's been emanating from, not from the rank and file Catholics. But this little dance that they've been having with Islam started really in with the Second Vatican Council. In 1965, they issued a document called Nostra Aetate, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And that's where a lot of this garbage, these lies about Islam being a monotheistic Abrahamic faith that has much in common with Catholicism, started. It started in this document called Nostra Aetate, and they've been building on it a little bit at a time. Like you said, it was 1992 where this dogma ended up in the Catholic Catechism, put there by the beloved John Paul II. I think it was a few years after that, in the early 2000s, around 2002 or 2003, if I'm not mistaken, Pope John Paul II was the first pope to enter a mosque, the Great Mosque in Damascus, in which he said prayers in there with the imams and kissed a copy of the Quran. And so this little dalliance between Catholicism and Islam has been building over the decades, and I'm a little bit concerned as to where it's going to end up, especially in light of, especially Tony, in light of the recent sexual predator crisis that's been going on within the church. You know, these are desperate times for the Catholic Church. A lot of people have cut or stopped making their tithes and offerings to the church because of this this sexual crisis going on among the priests. And until it gets cleaned up, they vowed to stop giving to the church. And so it's being felt financially by the Vatican. And so, you know, when a dog is cornered and feels threatened, that is when that dog is most dangerous. And so we really need to keep our eyes on Pope Francis, because frankly, he is a globalist and a Marxist. And if you look all around the world, what are globalists and Marxists doing? They're joining the team of Islam, politically, if not religiously. They're hitching their wagons to Islam. We see it going on in our own country. We're going to touch on that in a minute here, I think, with the advent of the two Muslim congresswomen, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and how they have been threatening, intimidating, making anti-Semitic remarks, and then getting backup from Nancy Pelosi when it, you know, was not expected. And so Pope Francis is not really doing anything that we're not seeing the Marxists doing all over the place. And it really is starting to get scary. You know,
and people need to know too that even though this Marxist allegiance with the socialists and communists, that is part of the plan right now, but the end goal has no ultimate team effort with these other groups. They're just using those groups and teaming up with them temporarily to push forward their own agenda. Before we move on to the Muslim Congresswoman, I do want to point our viewers to another resource which also lines up and ties in with the Roman Catholic allegiance with Islam, but it's the Common Word movement, which a lot of people still have not heard about, but has been out for a number of years. If you go to radicaltruth.net, you go to articles, you have about 30 different options there. But if you click on Common Word, you'll find a number of documents, articles, about the Common Word document, which doesn't only take the Muslims and the Roman Catholics, but also evangelicals or different Protestant groups who are all coming together with that. So the Common Word movement and document is another thing to check out in addition to Leo's book.
Tony, we have the Common Word movement, as you just said, and we also have the Alliance of Virtue for the Common Good movement, which involves Pastor Roberts. He's pastor of a mega church down in Texas, and he has hooked up with an imam friend of his and started this alliance of virtue for the common good. They had a huge conference in Washington, D.C. last year, and there was a surprising number of evangelicals there. As we've said, the Catholic Church has been involved in this interfaith movement with Islam since the 1960s, and the mainline Protestant denominations have followed suit. Most of them are compromised in this same exact realm of interfaith dialogue, and now we're seeing the last holdout, the evangelicals, joining in. And so this is sort of the grand triumvirate of Christianity in the world today. The only ones that seem a little bit standing on the sidelines is the Orthodox Church, but I suspect there are even a few of them who are involved in this interfaith movement, and it really is a drive toward what we would call, us who look to the Bible as our inspiration for these times, would see it as the advent of a one world religion.
World religion. Mm-hmm. Exactly what I was just thinking. Because everyone's agreeing, saying, oh yeah, we all agree, believe the same thing. Yeah. And of course, as you said, many Orthodox churches and those who are just educated in general know that there is no ultimate commonality here. We're using the same terms, but we're using different dictionaries. And if people don't know what those dictionaries, how they define certain words, then people aren't going to be educated about this. These Muslim Congress or CongressMuslims or Muslim Congresswomen, however you want to describe them, obviously they are showing up all over the place in the news. This is something that a lot of people have not even heard about. A lot of people are hearing about the anti-Semitism stuff. Here, Representative Rashida Tlaib failed to disclose Soros Fellowship funding. And you will see a number of news stories out there. Center for Security Policy, Tlaib was paid by Soros and failed to disclose it. If you go to the Radical Truth Facebook page, you'll see another thing here talking about the exact dollar amount. This isn't even being talked about. It's just been talking about the anti-Semitism, right?
Exactly. But we all know that if you want to know the source of this evil agenda that we've been seeing, this anti-Semitic agenda, an anti-Christian agenda, you have to follow the money. And as this news story that came out, yesterday or today is telling us, I haven't had a chance to inspect the article yet, but I'm hearing it from you for the first time, and it sounds like it's the same source of many of these other left-wing radical movements, and that is George Soros. So, follow the money. And I think it's time for the Christian people of America to start looking and taking a closer eye towards where are they putting their money. Oftentimes the flow of this money to the most far left wing of America starts at the local grassroots level. Christian Americans giving their money, retirees donating money to AARP, which we know donates in turn to far left-wing action groups, including Planned Parenthood and things like that. You buy Girl Scout cookies as you walk into the Costco or the Walmart in your local community, and the Girl Scouts donate, we find out, to Planned Parenthood and have connections with them. You've got Christians sending their children to left-wing universities and spending tens of thousands of dollars every year to contribute to these far-left college campuses that don't allow any freedom of speech for anything other than the left. You put money in the church basket without asking where your church is donating money. I know for a fact that the Catholic Church and the mainline denominations are sending money to Saul Alinsky type community organizing groups, in the name of, quote, helping the poor. No, they're not helping the poor. They're helping establish the Marxist agenda. And so it's time that we start engaging like our adversaries do. They realize that they are involved in a political war. In my book, I call it it's in effect World War III, but it's an unconventional war of ideas. It's not waged on the battlefield with tanks and guns. But there's only one side currently engaged in this World War III, and it's the left.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it's high time that we start watching the groups that we give money to, and who are they giving our money to once they get it.
Leo, this is a very important point that people need to realize. And yes, they do need to get your book, again, Stealth Invasion, Muslim Conquest Through Immigration, Resettlement, Jihad. This is how much the news story about Soros and Tlaib has been pushed down or suppressed. People are just now hearing about that, but there are not so well-known conservative websites out there who had first reported this in December of 2018, January of 2019, and just now many people are starting to hear about it. So just type in TLAIB and Soros. You put in those two names, you will pull up a number of articles on this. But Leo, speaking of charities and donations and all of that, another brand new news story that's coming out that again is being pushed out of the light by the whole anti-Semitism stuff. Evangelical leader had exposed Ilhan Omar and that she violated a federal statute fundraising for Muslim Brotherhood charities. And of course, that doesn't just tie into the charity aspect that you were just talking about, but of course, the Muslim Brotherhood in particular, whose agenda is rolling forward quite nicely in the U.S., is it not?
Yes, sir. And, your listeners know what that agenda is. We hear, whenever we do hear anything, relatively enlightening about Islam, or, even in conservative media these days, it seems to be, pinpointing on the terrorist aspect. Well, the way things are going right now in the political landscape of this country, the Muslim Brotherhood does not need to use any terroristic threats or terroristic entities to get its agenda through. They're doing just fine by waging political warfare, and they're doing it through people, I call them lightning rods, people like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. They may say stuff that sounds crazy to the untrained ear, just radically anti-Semitic statements, anti-American statements. But this is all done with a purpose, because the Brotherhood, Tony, as you know, has become expert at snatching victory out of the jaws of defeat. This is their area of special expertise. They did it after 9/11. Islam was never a more negative, dirty word in this country as it was after 9/11. All of the terrorists who took down those towers were Muslims. I believe 17 of the 19, 16 maybe of them were from Saudi Arabia, a couple from Pakistan, one from Egypt, all hardcore Sharia-compliant Muslims. That, you would think, would have been the death knell for Islam in this country. But what happened? Islam became more popular in the ensuing years in the United States and North America than it could have ever have dreamed of. And that's because the Muslim Brotherhood was successful in portraying Muslims as victims. And this is exactly what they're doing with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. They'll make outrageous statements condemning Israel as an evil, toxic influence on the world. They'll tweet it out, or they'll say it. And Tlaib can even call our president, an MFer who needs to be impeached. But then the Brotherhood, the face of the Brotherhood, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations, sweeps in and says, when we start to criticize, naturally, which anyone would do when we hear these outrageous things, the Brotherhood, through the Council on American Islamic Relations, sweeps in and starts what? Throwing out accusations and calling all of us who react as calling us Islamophobes, xenophobes, evil, bad people. And so they are then able to get their message out that the real problem is not anti-Semitism or anti-Christianity, it's anti-Muslim bigotry and Islamophobia. And the media, of course, just runs with these memes, unquestionably. And it really is disgusting. how it plays out. The good guys get branded as the bad, and the bad get branded as the victims.
And what people are not realizing either is that America is not an honor shame culture. And yet, with all the work that the Muslim Brotherhood is doing in the West, it is, without us knowing, transforming the West into an honor shame culture, and that you should be shamed, or shame on you, is what the CAIR representatives say all the time. When you say anything negative about Islam, you say something negative about Islam, oh, why are you hating Muslims? Or they could keep conflating terms all the time, playing very sneaky word games. And again, they use words that we use here in the West, but are defined differently. And people do not realize this. And of course, you bring in the money aspect, and you bring in all of the rubbing shoulder connections. Muslim Brotherhood has been working for years building relationships with political leaders, military leaders, religious leaders, law enforcement, etc., editing school textbooks and government documents and all that stuff. Leo, I want to thank you so much for being here on Colliding Worldviews once again. And again, I want to encourage people to get your book, Stealth Invasion. Folks, if you want to support Leo and his work, this is the book that you want to get. And you want to get it on his website, leohoman.com. He will personally sign this for you and ship it out to you. And this is a page turner. You will not be able to put this down, as he gives you a bunch of different evidence of what's been happening that has not even made it into the mainstream media, let alone is not being talked about by many people. Leo, thank you so much for being here once again, informing our audience. And God bless you and your work. And I know that a lot of people are looking forward to your next book as well. 30 seconds. What is that next book going to be about?
Oh, absolutely. It is going to be called The Interfaith Deception, and it is going to delve in detail into how our churches, our synagogues are up to their ears in helping the Muslim Brotherhood actually take over and gain the upper hand in our political system, in our schools, in our churches, and it really is heading towards the danger zone if we don't wake up. Thank you so much, Tony, for having me on, and it's my honor to be with you anytime you would have me back, and just thank you so much.
Thank you. Friends, we need to get this book. This one's a little older now, but again, people need to see it. But definitely that next book, with if Americans waking up, we can finally get a book like that onto the New York Times bestseller list. So let that be our goal in the months ahead when that does come out. But thank you so much for being here once again on Colliding Worldviews. Continue to share the gospel with people around you. Muslims are included into that all people category. So even though they may be the most intimidating people to reach out to, many Muslims are just the gospel away from leaving Islam and coming to Christ. So we'll see you next time on Colliding Worldviews.